Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is iRunShib, or Shib for short. The goal of this video is to dive through a summoning Necromancer build for Endgame. I spent a lot of time on this build after perfecting that Shadow Necromancer build because I wanted to find something that was going to keep us to the core aspect of the Necromancer, and that is having minions around. This build relies heavily on lucky hit chance and your mages doing insane damage to force you to sweep the entire map with a minion army that requires no defensive abilities out of you, but instead a couple of defensive aspects and a lot of lucky hit chance. Let's dive right in. I love you, so excuse me. How does that work? Me likey. All right, so let's dive right into how this build works. The left click, or our basic ability, is going to be Decompose. Decompose is essentially a laser beam between you and the enemy. When an enemy dies while being decomposed, you gain essence, and then on top of that, your minions deal 10% increased damage to anyone being decomposed. So it's a laser beam between you and an enemy. Really good to use on top of a boss while your minions are destroying the boss. Just 10% increased damage for them. We are not using a single one of our core abilities, which is really cool and unique aspect to this build. Instead, we're going to really focus on getting Hewed Flesh, which is a lucky hit chance for you to spawn a corpse to the ground. Spawning corpses is very important for this build. Not only are we going to use them to proc lucky hit chance later, but it's also going to be a way for us to heal our minions and give us Fortify. And we'll talk about that in a second. So for our Corpse and Macabre skills, we're going to be using Corpse Explosion. The main reason for that being that it has a 57% lucky hit chance. So we're going to be spamming the crap out of the skill, hoping that it procs those lucky hits and leads to some crazy damage, but we'll explain what that is later in the build. It's going to increase its radius, and then use standard Corpse Explosion instead of the Miasma just to keep the screen clean, and also it allows you to see where the corpses are so you can keep clicking on them and using corpse tendrils and explosion. We'll talk about that shortly. Every time you generate or use one of those corpses, you're going to get 6 essence, whether that be from corpse explosion or summoning minions, or utilizing it to summon priests when you're full on minions. You deal 9% increased damage for 6 seconds after consuming a corpse. Very strong for this specific build. You're going to max out your skeletal warriors, and you're going to add some spiked armor for the warriors. Even though that is not necessarily a huge benefit to this build, it's still something I found useful for the points. Decrepify, very strong for this build. This actually is going to be on our right click instead of any of those core abilities, because this has a very unique interaction with lucky hit chance, and this is something I really want people to pay attention to. When you use Decrepify, you have a first off, it does 40% slow, and it makes them do 20% less damage at rank 1. I find that keeping it at rank 1 is totally fine, because the main reason is lucky hit. Here's where it gets interesting. Lucky hit. Enemies hit while affected with Decrepify have a 10% chance to be stunned for 2 seconds. So this actually doesn't require your abilities to go into the lucky hit proc. So a lot of abilities have a lucky hit proc, so where the abilities connect, they have a chance to proc all those different lucky hit aspects. But what Decrepify does is it uniquely, any source of damage from a minion that has Decrepify on them can proc this, which gives them a 10% chance to be stunned for 2 seconds. And not only that, enemies hit while affected with the Decrepify have a 50% chance to reduce your cooldowns. So you're going to put Decrepify on the enemies, your minions are going to be constantly raining on them, thorns are going to be spreading off from some of your enemies, and all of those things have a chance to reduce your cooldowns and stun the enemies. So strong, so useful for a minion build. This is the only one that your minions are going to be able to proc these two all of the time. On top of that, we want to make sure our mages are getting increased health and damage. Mages are super important for this specific build. Corpse Tendrils is great for this build simply because of the fact that it's going to pull everyone to one location. And honestly, I find a lot of the time that for some reason, the 29% lucky hit chance on Corpse Tendrils just seems to proc more. It seems like my My Ring of Men down, which I'll talk about later, seems to proc every single time I'm using Corpse Tendrils. It's super strong. Enemies who are in the range of Corpse Tendrils are slowed, which is nice, and then it makes them vulnerable just so minions can do insane damage after they're all stunned. And the nice thing about having Decrepify on this build is this ability right here, Corpse Tendrils, seems to be off cooldown almost instantly after using it, because all the enemies being hit by your minions are going to make sure your cooldowns are proccing down, immediately ready for action again. Another really strong aspect of this build is when a corpse is formed from your skills or your minion, fortify for 6% of your base life. And since we have so much corpse generation, you're going to be fortified very frequently. I love Army of the Dead on this build because of the unique that makes it so minions during Army of the Dead take 90% reduced damage. And I have it so it's increasing their attack speed by like 92%. It might be over 100. I can't remember. I have it on the necklace. We'll look at that shortly. When Army of the Dead volatile skeletons explode, they leave a corpse. That's just nice to have more corpses. And then it also is a great reset for your minions. Although I find in this specific build, my minions are not falling frequently or at all, but still it's nice to have as a reset mechanic. You're going to put points in every single one of these minion buffs. They're all self-explanatory. More damage when you're near your minions, so really good to sit on the back line on the mages. They gain attack speed when you're healthy, and you're going to stay in the back very frequently on this build. It's all about your minions in the front. Your minions cannot lose more than 30% of their life in a single instance. And then every 5 seconds, every time you cast one of your skeletal priests, which is just the summon button when your minions are full, it'll heal them for 60% of your life. So if any of them are getting weak, you hit one of these every 5 seconds, your minions will shoot back 60% of their life. It's super good. And you're going to use Callan's Edict for the key passive. Is just going to increase the attack speed of the minions, and it's going to be doubled when you have at least 7, which you will have, so you'll have a 30% increased attack speed on your minions there too. Paragon boards are going to vary based on the glyphs that you have. That's self-explanatory as can be. I use the glyph socket that increases rare nodes in the first segment because it increases your armor, intelligence, and it increases your damage, which I just find you need to use this rare node on the first point. In my personal opinion, you're going to jump so much damage from this. It's just not worth passing up on. And I have it so that it increases damage when the corpses are around me. And since I constantly have corpses around me, it's increased damage there. Climb up, and you're going to look for the legendary passive of Cult Leader. That's just going to further increase the damage based on minion type. We're not going to be using golems on this because it takes up a necessary skill slot. So instead, you're going to just have 30% increased damage as a flat number. The real positive of this board comes with the rare nodes though, so that's going to be, you know, things like 20% minion damage, skeletal mage damage, minion damage and minion attack speed, and you'll see this on the board down below, but don't go anywhere because we still got to talk about aspects. The skeletal mage damage of an additional 34% here, super good. Also, a glyph here I have for skeletal mage damage in general, increasing based on the amount of intelligence around. This glyph is so good for mages. I cannot explain it enough. I have 130% mage damage on this glyph right now. It's wild. I have it at level 15, so it increases the range, and I'm just grabbing intelligence everywhere possible, making this do so much damage. It's literally insane. More minion or skeletal mage damage up here, and resistances. And then next, we're going to reach out to Flesh Eater. Flesh Eater in this board is another strong one. We're going to eventually get up to the glyph socket up here. Flesh Eater just makes it so after you consume corpses, you do 40% increased damage, and it sets for consuming corpses all the time. That's just very positive for this build. And then you're going to go to things like damage to elites off this board. You're going to look for damage to elites and damage reduction and go into this glyph socket here. Now let's talk about legendary aspects. So there's a little bit of leeway with this. Since this build has no escapability, you want to have some defensive abilities. Some things that I really like including, which you'll see on my build, are things like this. When hit while not healthy, a magical bubble will appear, making you immune for 5 seconds. Really good for this build because if you're ever about to get stunned or enemies get to you, they spawn on you, you have an invulnerability for 5 seconds. So you can do so much with it. Get corpse tendrils off to stun everyone around you. Make sure you reposition. Stuff like this is just really good for this build. So I wouldn't hate an aspect like this, or the aspect where it's when you're hit or when you're stunned and you get unhealthy, it makes it so you're invulnerable and able to walk around. That's a really strong aspect too, but anything like that is pretty crucial to this build. Make sure you have something along those lines. And then outside of that, you're gonna have things like your cold mages cast Blizzard. That's very strong for freezing. Increase your mage amount. I really like this Howl from Below unique gloves just because my lucky hit chance, those minions that I explode with Corpse Explosion are going to run at enemies, ensuring that the lucky hit chance procs on an enemy. Like I said, there's that healthy bubble, increasing my skeletal warrior, so mages and warriors are both increased. Your skeletons gain increased damage while alive for up to 30%. I got a good roll on this. This is really strong as well. This is the God Roll necklace. Check out this necklace. Each time your minions deal damage to an enemy, they gain 20% attack speed up to 60%. But I have things like minion attack speed 20% on it. Outside of that, just notice on every single one of these pieces of equipment, I also am looking for lucky hit chance. That's just super important. You'll see lucky hit chance on a lot of this stuff. Like obviously on this piece of equipment, the Halfin below has a 8.7%, but you can get up to 16% on that, which is amazing. I have lucky hit on stuff like my shield. But anyway, returning to the aspect, just keep, on my rings too. Look for lucky hit as much as you can. Army of the Dead is active. Your minions gain 97% attack speed and take 90% reduced damage. So good, especially because your Army of the Dead is going to be coming off cooldown insanely fast with Decrepify. Then the basis of this build, a very important aspect of this build, is Ring 'em in down. It makes it so when you have 7 or more minions, one of the lucky hit chance procs is that all of your minions will do 16k and explode on their attack. When you pull them in with Corpse Tendrils and you get this to proc, you'll see enemies' health bars just delete, and it is so cool to watch, and it is a very strong aspect of the build. So that is why we're building so much lucky hit chance to begin with. And then last but not least, I think this is a necessary aspect on almost any build in endgame. Damaging an elite gives you a barrier for 49.69, which is very strong as well. So that's going to do it for the build today. I hope you enjoyed this kind of content. There's going to be plenty more of this stuff coming as we start with the seasons up here in the future. So if you like this kind of stuff, subscribing down below, coming over to Twitch and hitting that follow button, subscribing if you're feeling it there. We do have drops on Twitch right now. And if you give 2 subs on Twitch, you get an in-game mount. I'd love for y'all to drop by. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you soon.